And though we like to imagine Zach and the gang being, friends forever.
Saturday mornings in the late 80s and early 90s had a specific kind of magic. High school looked like the most incredible place on earth. Every teenager had perfect hair, solved every crisis before lunch. And the biggest emergency was whether you'd get asked to the dance. Welcome to Saved by the Bell, the show that premiered in 1989 and convinced an entire generation that being a teenager meant scheme-fueled chaos, where principals were your best friends and timeout could literally freeze time. Zach Morris was the blonde schemer we all wanted to be. Kelly Kapowski made cheerleading look like a legitimate career path. Screech turned social awkwardness into an art form. Today we're breaking down 15 weird facts about the show that owned Saturday mornings and made us believe high school would be way more fun than it actually was. Now, before we dive in, be sure to like and subscribe because it genuinely helps the channel grow. Let's get into it with number 15. Number 15, Screech's robot, Kevin, cost more than most people's cars. Remember Kevin, Screech's walking, talking disaster of a science project? That clunky robot that somehow had more personality than half the supporting characters? Yeah, that wasn't just a prop thrown together by the set department. Kevin was a fully functional robot that cost the production nearly $30,000 in late 1980s money. Think about that for a second. $30,000. That's roughly $70,000 in today's cash, which means Screech was casually rolling around Bayside with the equivalent of a luxury sedan programmed to embarrass him. The irony is beautiful. Here's a show about teenagers with apparently unlimited allowances, and the production spent more on a robot that appeared in maybe 6 episodes than they probably spent on Screech's entire wardrobe for 4 seasons. Dustin Diamond once joked in an interview,
"I've done everything I can. I've eaten a lot of steak. I've enjoyed a lot of Guinness."
That Kevin got better treatment on set than most of the cast, because damaging an expensive robot meant insurance paperwork, while injuring an actor just meant a phone call to their parents. For Gen Xers, Kevin represented the future we were promised, the robot butler era that never quite materialized. For millennials watching reruns in the 2000s, he was hilariously primitive proof of how far technology had come. We went from being impressed by a rolling trash can that could talk to carrying supercomputers in our pockets. But Kevin remains iconic anyway. The overpriced metallic reminder that Saved by the Bell spared no expense when it came to Screech's humiliation. Number 14, the show was almost called When the Bell Rings. Imagine living in a timeline where Saturday mornings weren't saved by anything, where the cultural phenomenon that defined a generation was called When the Bell Rings. It sounds like a documentary about school schedules, not the teen sitcom that would launch 1,000 imitators and make Time Out a legitimate plot device. NBC went back and forth on the title right up until the final marketing push. When the Bell Rings was the frontrunner because, according to producer Peter Engel, it felt more descriptive and educational, like they were making some kind of after-school special about time management instead of a comedy about teenage chaos.
But because he was a couple years younger, but at that time, when you're a teenager, it's a big difference.
The network was genuinely worried that Saved by the Bell sounded too much like a religious program, which is hilarious considering Zach Morris treated moral authority like a suggestion he could scheme his way around. Then someone in marketing had a moment of actual brilliance and pointed out that Saved by the Bell was already an expression everyone knew. It meant last-minute rescue, narrow escape, exactly the kind of barely avoiding consequences energy that defined every single episode. The title change happened so late that early promotional materials actually used both names, creating confusion that probably would have tanked the show if social media had existed to roast them for it. Thank whatever powers govern television naming that they made the switch. When the Bell Rings sounds like a show your parents would force you to watch for educational value. Saved by the Bell sounds like the show you'd sneak out of bed early to catch before anyone else woke up, which is exactly what it became. Number 13. Mr. Belding's office changed size every episode. Ever notice how Mr. Belding's office felt massive one week and claustrophobically small the next? How sometimes his desk faced the door, and sometimes it faced the window, and occasionally the window didn't exist at all. Yeah, that wasn't your imagination or some kind of Bayside architectural magic. That was good old-fashioned budget constraints meeting production reality in the most awkward way possible. The Saved by the Bell set wasn't some sprawling Hollywood facility. It was a relatively compact space where every room had to serve multiple purposes depending on the episode. Mr. Belding's office got reconfigured constantly because they needed that square footage for other scenes. Big pep rally episode, shrink the office, expand the gym, lots of classroom scenes. The office becomes a closet with a desk. Set designer Scott Heineman admitted in a 2005 interview that continuity wasn't exactly the priority. They were cranking out episodes fast enough that they figured most viewers wouldn't notice or care that the principal's workspace was apparently located in some kind of pocket dimension where the laws of physics were negotiable. And honestly, they were right. Most of us were too busy watching Zach scheme his way out of trouble to notice that the filing cabinet teleported between scenes. Number 12, Tiffany Thiessen was only 15 playing a senior. Picture this. You're a high school senior dealing with college applications, prom drama, and whether Zach Morris will finally commit to an actual relationship. You're also 15 years old, and technically not old enough to drive yourself to set. Welcome to Tiffany Thiessen's world when she started playing Kelly Kapowski, Bayside's resident perfect cheerleader who somehow looked 22 while being barely old enough for a learner's permit. The age gaps across the cast were honestly wild. Mark Paul Gosselaar was 15. Mario Lopez was 15. Elizabeth Berkley was 16. They were all playing 17 and 18-year-olds navigating senior year while being supervised by on-set tutors who made sure they completed actual homework between takes about fake homework. California child labor laws meant shooting schedules had to work around mandatory education hours, which explains why so many episodes felt like they took place in a temporal anomaly where school happened at weird hours. Thiessen has talked about how surreal it was to film scenes about college anxiety and adult relationships, while still needing permission slips for everything. She'd shoot a scene about Kelly worrying about her future, then immediately go study for her own actual algebra test. The disconnect was bizarre, but became normal because everyone on set was living the same strange double life. Number 11. The Max was filmed at two different locations. The Max, Bayside's impossibly cool hangout spot, where teenagers apparently had unlimited money for milkshakes, and the jukebox somehow always played exactly what the moment needed. That magical diner existed in two completely different physical locations, and the switch happened so abruptly that a continuity went out the window faster than Zach's promises to be faithful to Kelly. The original Max was filmed at a small restaurant in Burbank during the Good Morning Miss Bliss era and early Saved by the Bell episodes. Cozy, intimate, actually looked like a place teenagers might hang out if they had incredibly understanding parents and no curfew. Then production costs happened. The restaurant wanted more money for location fees. The production budget said absolutely not. And someone had to find a new Max before the next episode started shooting. Enter location number 2, a larger space in North Hollywood that looked nothing like the original, except for the strategic placement of booths and that iconic jukebox they transported like it was the Ark of the Covenant. The new Max was bigger, brighter, and if you watch closely, completely different in layout. Booths that used to be by the door suddenly faced the opposite direction. The counter changed sides. The kitchen entrance moved. It was architectural chaos. Eagle-eyed fans spotted the differences immediately, especially during syndication, when episodes aired out of order, and the Max kept shape-shifting between locations mid-season. Number 10. A.C. Slater almost had a different accent. Here's something that would have completely changed Bayside's dynamic. A.C. Slater, the jock with the mullet and the dimples, almost sounded nothing like the character we know. Mario Lopez showed up to his audition ready to play the role as written, an Italian tough guy from New York, and he came prepared with an accent that would have made The Godfather proud. According to Lopez in multiple interviews, he practiced the New York Italian inflection for weeks. He had the attitude, the swagger, the whole East Coast edge ready to go. Then he got into the audition room, started the scene, and the producers looked at each other with that expression that means, we're about to change everything. They stopped him mid-read and basically said, what if you just played yourself? Lopez is from California, speaks with a pretty neutral West Coast accent, and brought natural charm that didn't need any vocal affectation to land. The producers realized they'd written a character based on assumptions about what a jock should sound like, then found an actor who embodied the character better by ignoring half the description. So they rewrote Slater on the spot, kept the wrestling, the varsity jacket, the competitive streak, drop the accent, the New York backstory, and let Mario Lopez just be himself with slightly more muscles and significantly better hair gel. The change was so last minute that early scripts still referenced Slater's New York origins, creating weird continuity where he'd occasionally mention the East Coast, but sound like he'd never left California. Most viewers never noticed because the character worked so well that nobody cared where he was supposedly from. Imagine the alternate timeline, though. Slater, with a thick New York accent, calling Zach Morris in a way that sounds vaguely threatening. It would have been a completely different energy, probably way more antagonistic, definitely less charming. Number 9, Screech's suspenders were a copyright issue. Dustin Diamond's iconic look, the curly hair, the loud prints, and those suspenders that became so associated with Screech that you couldn't imagine him without them, almost didn't happen. The original wardrobe design for Screech included suspenders as a nerdy visual shorthand, but then someone in the legal department noticed that another very famous nerdy character was already rocking that exact look on a different network. Steve Urkel hadn't happened yet, but the wardrobe team was apparently concerned about similarities to other sitcom nerds whose estates or shows might object to the visual overlap. There was a brief panic where they considered dropping the suspenders entirely and going with a completely different aesthetic. Bow ties were suggested, sweater vests got thrown around. Someone even pitched making Screech wear a pocket protector full of pens, which would have been so on the nose it hurt. Then cooler heads prevailed, and someone pointed out that suspenders aren't exactly trademarkable, and nerdy characters have been wearing them since vaudeville. The costume department committed, made the suspenders part of Screech's signature look, and hoped nobody would sue them for the bold fashion choice of putting stretchy straps on a socially awkward teenager. The best part is how it played out. When Family Matters premiered and Steve Urkel became a cultural phenomenon, also wearing suspenders, it actually helped both shows. The nerdy kid with suspenders became a whole archetype, and both Screech and Urkel benefited from the association rather than competing over it. Number 8, the caffeine pill episode was banned in several markets. Oh, you thought NBC's decision to change Jesse's drug of choice from speed to caffeine pills would make the episode safe for everyone. Think again. Jesse's song, the legendary caffeine pill breakdown episode, got pulled from rotation in multiple markets because apparently even pretend addiction to legal stimulants was too intense for Saturday morning television in certain parts of America. Conservative markets, particularly in the South and Midwest, refused to air the episode during its original run. Station managers looked at Jesse Spano, screaming, "I'm so excited, I'm so scared," while clutching a pill bottle, and decided that wasn't the kind of content their viewers' children needed with their fruity pebbles. The irony is that NBC had already sanitized the script specifically to avoid controversy, and it caused controversy anyway. Parent groups sent letters. The episode became weirdly famous specifically because some markets banned it, which made teenagers desperate to see what the fuss was about. In the pre-internet era, kids in banned markets had to rely on friends in other cities to record the episode on VHS and smuggle it back like it was contraband. A Saturday morning sitcom episode about caffeine pills became the Footloose of teen television. The ban actually made the episode more impactful than it would have been otherwise. If it had aired everywhere without incident, it might have been just another very special episode that came and went. Instead, the controversy turned it into required viewing, a cultural moment that transcended the show itself. Elizabeth Berkley's performance became iconic, partly because of the memes, but also because the episode carried the weight of being forbidden content, which automatically makes anything more interesting. Number 7, Lisa's fashion budget exceeded the show's props. Lisa Turtle was Bayside's fashion queen, and that wasn't just character flavor. That was a legitimate production expense that made accountants nervous. Lark Vorhei's wardrobe budget for Lisa was reportedly higher than the combined cost of set props for multiple episodes, which is insane when you remember they were dressing a high school student for a Saturday morning sitcom. The producers made a calculated decision early on. Lisa's character was obsessed with fashion and shopping, so her outfits needed to actually reflect that. They couldn't dress her in generic mall clothes and expect the character to land. So they committed. Designer pieces, coordinated accessories, outfits that changed multiple times per episode. Lisa Turtle dressed better than most of the cast did in their real lives, which created the bizarre situation where the character's fictional closet was more valuable than the actress's actual wardrobe. The cost-benefit calculation was interesting. Yes, they were spending money on clothes for one character, but Lisa's fashion became part of the show's identity. She was the character girls watched to see what was cool, what colors worked together, what styles were coming. In a weird way, Lisa Turtle was a fashion influencer before influencers existed, and the wardrobe budget was the production's investment in making that authentic. Other characters wore the same jacket multiple episodes. Screech basically had a uniform, but Lisa showed up in something different every scene, and the continuity nightmare that created was apparently worth it. The wardrobe department worked overtime to track what she'd worn when, because heaven forbid Lisa Turtle repeat an outfit like some kind of casual dresser. Number 6, Mark Paul Gosselaar did his own stunts and regretted it. Zach Morris might have been able to freeze time and talk his way out of anything, but Mark Paul Gosselaar learned the hard way that doing your own stunts on a Saturday morning sitcom is a terrible idea when you're the lead, and the entire production schedule depends on your face being camera ready. The episode Running Zach had Gosselaar doing actual track and field stunts, including hurdles and high jump sequences that he insisted on performing himself because he was 16 and thought he was invincible. Halfway through filming, he landed wrong during a high jump attempt, tweaked his ankle, and suddenly the production had a problem. Their star couldn't walk properly. They had 3 days of shooting left, and the episode required Zach to be physically active. The solution was creative camera angles, a lot of sitting scenes that got hastily written into the script, and Mark Paul Gosselaar learning that stunt doubles exist for a reason. He's talked about it in interviews with a mix of embarrassment and pride. Yeah, he got hurt, but he also proved he could actually do the athletic stuff they were showing on screen, which mattered when you're playing a character who's supposed to be good at everything. After that incident, the producers put their foot down. No more stunts for the principal cast, unless absolutely necessary and heavily supervised. They weren't going to risk their shooting schedule because a teenage actor felt like being a hero. Stunt doubles became non-negotiable. And if you watch closely in later seasons, you can spot the moments where someone else's body is doing the physical comedy while a quick cut brings you back to the actor's face. The whole situation was very 90s television. No extensive safety protocols, just teenagers doing somewhat dangerous things until someone got hurt, and then everyone agreed to be more careful. It's amazing any of them made it through the series without serious injury, honestly. Number 5, the lockers were rented from actual high schools. Those iconic Bayside High hallways with the orange lockers that became so synonymous with the show, not custom-built Hollywood magic. Those were real lockers rented from Los Angeles area high schools that were being renovated and needed somewhere to store their old equipment. The production found schools upgrading their facilities and basically said, "Hey, can we borrow your trash for 4 years?" The rental agreements were beautifully weird. The schools got paid a small fee, the show got authentic lockers that actually worked, and everyone agreed to pretend this was a normal transaction. Some of the lockers still had residual stickers and dents from actual students, which the set department had to clean and repair to make them look presentable for television. The reason they went this route instead of building fake lockers is pure budget pragmatism.
Excuse me, but I think you've made a big mistake.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. You parked your bike in my parking space.
Lockers cost less than fabricating convincing fakes, and they had the added benefit of actually functioning. Actors could actually open and close them without worrying about flimsy props breaking mid-scene. The authenticity was accidental but effective. What's hilarious is that somewhere in Los Angeles, there were real high school students in the early 90s attending schools that had to make do with temporary replacement lockers, because their actual locker systems were moonlighting on a sitcom set. The Circle of Life Educational Facility Edition. For fans, this is another one of those perfect details that makes you realize how much of television is smoke and mirrors. You thought Bayside High was this fully realized fictional world, and it turns out half the set was borrowed from actual schools and returned when filming wrapped. Number 4, Kelly's cheerleading uniform violated network standards. Kelly Kapowski's cheerleading uniform is burned into the cultural memory of anyone who watched Saved by the Bell. But that iconic look almost didn't happen because NBC's Standards and Practices Department took one look at the original costume design and said absolutely not on Saturday morning television. The original uniform design was shorter and more fitted than what eventually made it to air. The costume designer was going for authentic high school cheerleader aesthetic, which in the late 80s meant skirts that were definitely shorter than network executives were comfortable showing to children eating cereal. Standards and practices sent the design back with notes that essentially read,
Lisa is the quickest girl on 2 feet. With her on her side, we can't be beat. Go, Lisa!
make it longer and less fitted, or we're not airing this show. The compromise they reached was adding about 3 inches to the skirt length and adjusting the fit to be less form-hugging, which the costume department accomplished while still making it look like a cheerleading uniform rather than a modest church outfit. Tiffany Thiessen has joked that the network-approved version still generated fan mail that ranged from admiring to wildly inappropriate, which meant standards and practices probably made the right call, even if it frustrated the designers. The whole situation is a perfect snapshot of 90s television walking the line between appealing to teenage viewers and not terrifying their parents. Every costume choice was a negotiation between authenticity and acceptability, and Kelly's cheerleading uniform was the most visible battleground because she wore it constantly. Number 3, 3 episodes were shot but never aired. Here's the kind of television trivia that haunts superfans. Saved by the Bell filmed 3 complete episodes that never made it to broadcast. Not rough cuts, not abandoned concepts, fully shot, edited, scored episodes that got shelved for reasons that range from creative differences to we have no idea what they were thinking.
And what if I don't, punk? Then I'll just have to make you, punk.
One episode reportedly dealt with Zach getting into a physical fight at school, which the network decided sent the wrong message for Saturday morning programming. Another involved a storyline about teen gambling that NBC felt was too mature, despite being less problematic than half the schemes Zach pulled in aired episodes. The third episode's content remains mysterious, with cast members giving vague, "it just didn't work" explanations in interviews. The footage still exists somewhere in NBC's archives, a lost piece of Saved by the Bell history that fans would probably pay unreasonable amounts to see. Various petitions over the years have asked for the episodes to be released as bonus content for anniversary editions, but the network has stayed quiet. Either the episodes are genuinely problematic, or NBC is saving them for some future cash grab when nostalgia value peaks. What kills fans is knowing these episodes are complete. It's not like they're missing footage or unfinished. They're sitting in a vault somewhere, fully watchable, just perpetually unreleased. It's the television equivalent of knowing there's a secret room in your house but never being allowed to open the door. Number 2, Dennis Haskins was the oldest teenager on set. Here's a beautiful irony. Dennis Haskins, who played Mr. Belding, the adult authority figure and principal of Bayside High, was treated more like a peer by the cast than an authority figure because the behind-the-scenes dynamic was so relaxed that age became irrelevant. Haskins was in his late 30s and early 40s during the show's run, playing a high school principal, but hanging out with teenage actors who saw him more as a cool older friend than a father figure. By all accounts, he leaned into it. He joined their pranks, participated in their between-takes chaos, and created an environment where the supposed adult in the room was just another member of the gang. This dynamic actually made the show work better. The scenes where Mr. Belding acts more like Zach's buddy than his disciplinarian feel authentic because that's basically what Dennis Haskins was to Mark Paul Gosselaar. The weird principal-student friendship that defined so many episodes wasn't acting.
Bayside's academic team is winless in bowl competition. Does this losing tradition concern you?
Heck no.
And teenage hormones made everything dramatic. He was the steady presence who remembered that they were making a sitcom, not curing cancer, and kept everyone from taking it too seriously. His oldest teenager energy made him the perfect person to play a principal who somehow cared more about his students' personal lives than actual education. For fans, Mr. Belding was the adult we wished ran our schools. For the cast, Dennis Haskins was the adult who made going to work feel less like work and more like hanging out with friends who happened to be filming a TV show. Number 1, the show's finale was filmed before half the final season. Ready for the logistical nightmare that perfectly summarizes everything chaotic about Saved by the Bell's production? They filmed the graduation finale, the emotional send-off where everyone leaves Bayside forever, months before they shot a bunch of episodes that chronologically came before it. Why? Contract negotiations, scheduling conflicts, and the kind of production chaos that makes you wonder how this show ever made it to air at all. Getting everyone's schedules to align was increasingly difficult as cast members started booking other projects. So, the producers made the very logical but completely insane decision to shoot the finale early when they had everyone available, then fill in the rest of the season afterward with episodes that made no narrative sense given that they had already filmed everyone graduating. This created the beautiful mess where actors had to pretend they were still invested in Bayside's daily drama while knowing they had already shot themselves walking away from the school forever. They'd film a heartfelt graduation scene about saying goodbye, then come back the next day to shoot Zach, scheming to win a radio contest, or whatever low-stakes nonsense filled the middle episodes.
You know, son, you've got something very special inside of you. I hope I'm around to see it when you let it all out.
It explains why the final season feels weirdly uneven. Some episodes have real weight, dealing with college anxiety and future plans. Others feel like they were written by people who forgot this was the last season. The Tori episodes fit into this chaos too. Kelly and Jesse had moved on. The show needed episodes, so they created a temporary character to fill space while shooting everything backward and hoping fans wouldn't notice. It's television production as jazz improvisation. Just make it up as you go and hope it sounds coherent when assembled. And there you have it. 15 weird facts about the show that taught a generation what high school should look like and then left us all disappointed when reality delivered something completely different. Which facts surprised you the most? Drop your biggest revelation in the comments below. Be sure to hit like, subscribe, and ring that bell for more nostalgic deep dives into the shows that shaped our Saturday mornings. Until next time.